The U.S. exported nearly 10 million barrels of oil and refined products last week, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. Exports of gas totaled 1 million barrels a day for the week. Everybody, Joe Biden's new Inflation Act is now offering up to $14,000 in additional financial assistance to many low-income families. There are over 70 Democratic lawmakers that are urging Congress to step up to the plate and pass legislation that would actually prevent a government shutdown. Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act on climate change is helping many Americans reduce their carbon footprint. A key element in that push is offering up to $14,000 in rebates and tax credits for people to make their homes more energy efficient. Those benefits can be used to lower the cost of home upgrades, ranging from installing heat pumps to buying new electric purchases, and like stoves and dryers. About 40% of carbon emissions stems from buildings, and so these incentives can actually help the U.S. achieve its goal of lowering fossil fuel emissions. According to experts, this gives people some very concrete and generous incentives to do that, both in the form of tax credits and direct cash rebates. CBS News has said that it is the biggest federal investment in buildings ever, at least one that is specified for climate change. There are two separate rebate programs. The Homes Rebate Program provides more than $4 billion in states to help residents make their entire home more energy efficient, and the program provides rebate based on the energy savings they upgrade their home in. And now, for instance, homeowners that make changes that cut their energy usage by at least 35% can get up to $4,000 in rebates. That amount is doubled for low and middle income households who can get $8,000 in rebates. High Efficiency Electric Home Rebate Act provides rebate for low and middle income families to electrify their home, like installing heat pumps or electric clothes dryers. The per household rebate is capped at $14,000, and households cannot receive two rebates for the same upgrade. The Homes Rebate Program would cover upgrades from solar panels to new windows that help your home become more energy efficient. The other program designates rebates for specific appliances and purchases and other upgrades. One of the consumers and one of the most appealing rebates is a provision that is offering up to $8,000 for heat pumps, and this provides air and conditioning as heating.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in March, the SEC proposed a climate risk disclosure rule that takes a big step toward increasing the efficiency of the economy and of financial markets by requiring companies to inform investors about the climate-related risks that affect their businesses. Now, as part of this rule, the SEC proposes that companies disclose their greenhouse gas emissions, and a company's emissions are classified into three different categories called scopes. So, Chair Gensler, just so we can set a baseline here, let's run through an example. Let's say I'm Exxon. My Scope 1 emissions would be from things like my company's vehicles and methane leaks that occur at the wellhead of the wells that I own. Scope 2.
And important, the law reduces inflation and it reduces the deficit. And as the leader said, it is fully paid for by making the biggest companies and the wealthiest pay their fair share. Under the president's leadership, and with the stroke of President Biden's pen, we have achieved a monumental victory for America's working families. Indeed,
As of July, the interest rate rose from 4 to 4.5%, and as a result, the Federal Reserve's recent decision to raise crisis funds. The money never came through, and now the administration has agreed to give $27 billion back, including a significant portion of what remained in the fund for emergency preparedness and response. States are in the process of allocating money towards new programs. A guaranteed income program in Wisconsin issued its latest payment worth $500. The payments are put forward every single month, and a lot of people receive them and receive the money they need. And the program as a whole will be the last one for one more year. This first payment was issued in September, and the final payment will be sent in August. But even a household of two, for example, can make more than $36,000 and get the payments every single month. Now, some governors are backing a one-time tax rebate to put as much as $800 in the pockets of the American people. And the governor told reporters a paycheck does not go as far as it did 2 years ago, and I'm working to give nearly $1 billion back to the hands of hard-working, tax-paying Alabama residents. But applications for new guaranteed income programs in Massachusetts, for example, opened, with selected participants receiving monthly payments of up to $500. So folks, it's great to see that Joe Biden is actually doing something to help the American people, which Since mid-2022, politicians have warned Americans and a growing number of tax people to be exact about this. And the IRS has said that it wants to hire new employees using funds from the $80 billion allocated to the Inflation Reduction Act. But according to several experts, the IRS does not plan to use all of that funding for hiring purposes alone. As the New York Times pointed out, the IRS total number of full-time employees is 20% fewer than what the agency had in 2010. Even though the population has grown, to bolster its numbers, the agency plans to hire using a lot of money, with roughly $7,200 of those being hiring enforcement staff. This would add to the 5,000 phone personnel the agency hired before the 2023 tax season began. Increased funding to the agency would help it more experienced auditors who can handle complicated tax filings. It could help the agency close the annual gap between what is owed and what is collected. The agency has said that it wants to help taxpayers get the deductions and tax credits they deserve. Right now, the focus is on providing eligible and educational materials that break down deductions in plain language. So hopefully people can get their stimulus cash. Folks, we have a lot of news about the fourth stimulus check, Social Security benefits, SSI, and SDI. Continue watching this video because you don't want to miss out on this. For the vast majority of Social Security beneficiaries, their monthly check is vital to their financial well-being. After 20 years of annual polling, it is found that no less than 80% of retirees rely on their Social Security benefit in some capacity to meet their monthly expenses. But with the U.S. debt limit and ceiling deadline looming, more than 66 million beneficiaries are wondering whether the Social Security checks will be on the shopping block. The debt ceiling represents the authorized borrowing limit for the federal government. It's important to keep in mind that it doesn't include borrowing for new spending or projects. Rather, it's to cover the federal debt limit and existing financial obligations. At no point in America's history has the federal government defaulted on its legal financial obligations, which is why the current debt limit impasse between Democrats and Republicans on Capitol Hill was turning heads. The expectation prior to this week is that Treasury lawmakers had perhaps 2 or 3 months to agree on a bill that would raise or suspend the debt ceiling in order to allow the federal government to meet its financial obligations. The Treasury Secretary and a former Federal Reserve Chairman allowed and altered that sending. Now, Yellen's letter made it clear that the debt limit issues for the U.S. may be worse than initially feared. In other words, if lawmakers fail to act, the U.S. Treasury may not be able to meet the country's existing debt limit obligations. But the big question is, does that include failing to pay Social Security benefits? Well, thanks to a law passed in Congress, Social Security checks should keep flowing, even if the U.S. government begins defaulting on its other financial obligations as early as June. This law allows and effectively obligates Janet Yellen to circumvent the debt ceiling by disinvesting the Social Security asset reserves. Since Social Security's exemption, the program has collected more revenue than it's paid out in benefits and other administrative expenses. This cash, known as Social Security's asset reserves, is required by law to be invested in interest-bearing special bonds.